we were just talking, and he was telling me about how he's an English teacher in Japan, and I was like, this dude knows like 5 languages, bro. Like what?
I wish I did, but no.
That's gonna kill me. Anywho, so you, I was browsing through Hive. I was looking at your Discord.
Uh-huh.
You have three. Well, I guess even four significant projects. One of the projects is Desert Smite 1 and 2,
That's right.
and then Fort Wars, and then I think I was looking at some Assault Arena?
Yeah,
Assault the Throne.
Assault the Throne, yeah. That's the new thing that I'm making right now, which is taking up a majority of my time these days. But essentially, I'm recreating the entire of co-op commanders in StarCraft, but in Warcraft 3.
Corp Commanders?
Co-op commanders, yes. So if you've never played StarCraft 2, co-op commanders has a Blizzard-made mode. StarCraft 2 has a mode that's made by Blizzard called Co-op Commanders. And in this mode, it's effectively it's 2 players, and you do like a cooperative strategy mission, kind of like a mini mission from like the campaigns or something. And the 2 of you have to work together to defeat like a huge AI base with some like optional objectives and things like that. So I'm recreating the same thing, but with 6 custom races, so none of the standard game races. And it's also going to have persistent XP unlocks. So as you play the game again and again, you unlock more items, more technologies, etc. as the game goes forward. So you can replay it as many times as you want, and you're earning stuff each time, which allows you to take on, say, the higher difficulties and things like that.
Yeah. So just an aside, any of these maps we were talking about, I'm going to link in the description. And he has some pretty cool previews. Like, I just pulled this up, Assault the Throne preview. You like previewing like text commands, like intro sequence, all that. So I'll throw those in just for reference. But that sounds dope.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it because the thing is, the maps that I make are the games that I want to play. So I don't make anything because somebody else thinks it's a good idea. I make it because I think I'll enjoy it.
Oh,
and that is the best way to make anything, I think. You should always make what you want to play, what you want to enjoy. Because I don't think you make the best thing that you can make if it's not what you want to play, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. I make a map too, and sometimes I fall into the especially because I'm streaming and I stream the map making, people will like hyper pressure me, like, do this, don't do this, don't do this, which is like fine. I mean, that's good because they're engaged. But sometimes I feel like it just kind of kills my creativity. Like, oh, like, let's do this cool thing. No, you can't fucking do that. That's like not in the lore or whatever.
Yeah. And I think you may have heard of something called the feedback problem, which is where people believe that because they play your game, that their feedback is always valuable. And it's not always the case, because they don't know how to make the game. You're the maker, not them. So a lot of people think, oh, well, at the end of the game, it'd be really cool if you had this like Zeppelin that like paradropped goblins in, and then the goblins could like blow up the buildings. And you as the maker are like, what? Why? Why is that a thing? And what the feedback should have been was something more like, I felt frustrated that I couldn't do X in the late game. Now, if they'd have phrased their concern in that way, you could have said, oh, I see what you mean. Maybe that's a problem I need to fix. But a lot of people, rather than giving their feedback, they give their solution. And that's the big problem. Because to you, it seems completely nonsensical.
That was eloquent.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, I didn't make up that theory. That's actually something I took from Day 9, if you've heard of him.
He's like the StarCraft guy, right?
That's right. Well, you could say he certainly was the StarCraft guy. He still is, but he does a lot of other games as well. And his kind of philosophies on like game design, game feedback, etc., are very, very insightful. And yeah, I give credit to him for that one, not me.
Yeah, so I just got into mapping recently. I basically like started playing this map called War in the Plaguelands, which if you're
Hmm.
watching, you probably
Yeah.
automatic. I'm like the War in the Plaguelands guy, whatever. And what happened was like that became I fucking it's this genre which doesn't exist. It's one of these like Warcraft 3 things where there's like this really specific like niche genre of like between an RTS or tower defense,
Hmm.
whatever, and it doesn't exist anywhere else.
Yeah.
And I was like really into the map, and what happened was I just started editing it because I was like the guy who edited it kind of like dropped off, and yeah, that's where I'm at. I'm
Mm. And have you found that over time you've kind of developed it to the way that you like to play it?
um I'd say there was definitely a learning curve that took up a reasonable amount of
Mm.
time because I'd say let's say I started in I guess like February, and I
Uh-huh. Yeah.
like the first 2 months were just plagued with me like not backing up files and the map getting corrupted or just like some fucking Blizzard shit.
Yeah.
I'd say yes, but I also
Mm.
focused in the beginning more on like if you come into a map that's been edited by multiple people over years, there's always like gigantic inconsistencies in everything, you name it.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
Usually very unoptimized. So the first things that I did was like optimize it, make the tooltips nice, like make it all pretty, and then I just started getting into making it like the way that I wanted it to a couple months ago, and then Reforged started to drop off. I actually just got back into it again after a little break.
Okay. Yeah, I'm guessing. I mean, it sounds like you have quite a similar approach to myself. Do you do what's called top-down or down-up design? Now, what I mean by that is top-down is where you say, "I'll design the tooltip first, or I have an idea first, and then I'll build it in the code." Or do you think, "Oh, I've got an interesting code idea. I'll do that first, and then think, okay, how does that fit into the game?"
Top down,
Which
100%.
top-down,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
I write like whole
Um,
documents.
no, that's a good idea then. Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm sort of in the middle. So I'll think of an idea that I want to implement. Like, oh, I want a spell that shoots a projectile in a straight line and pierces through multiple targets. Something like this. But I'll think, okay, but where would that fit in the game first? So I'll be like, okay, well, maybe it'd be like an arrow projectile. So maybe I'll have an archer hero that fires it. And then what I'll do is I'll design the tooltip next. I'll go, okay, what's the tooltip going to say? And what sounds good and what makes sense? And then I'll build the code after that. So it's kind of a halfway approach, but I think that's mainly just because I like to challenge myself with the programming. So it's part of the reason, I think.
Do you have like a kind of an aside, I guess relevant. Do you have like a system on Hive? Like I feel like I've actually seen your name a lot on Hive, and now I'm like,
Well, at the moment, I am programming alongside one of my friends who I've known for many, many years. He's much more of a in the shadows kind of guy. So he makes incredible systems for Warcraft 3 and then just doesn't release them, doesn't show them to anybody, doesn't tell them about it. So I use his systems and then I tell people,
I
geez, look how
see.
amazing this is, right? Yeah, so we have things like missile systems, all kinds of tools that you can use to program extremely complex things within Warcraft 3, but very easily. And the biggest thing by far that we're working on now is we can program a Warcraft 3 map entirely in C sharp. So we don't have to
Maybe
use
maybe that's the thing
anything
that I
else.
saw.
Most likely, yes. Yeah.
'Cause I was
So
like,
I have been pushing that quite a lot recently. I've actually got a short tutorial on my YouTube channel, which you can watch, and it tells you how to set up the coding environment to
I've watched that. That's
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's absolutely revolutionized it for me because after learning how incredibly bad the GUI coding is,
Oh yeah.
um, to see the massive improvement to Lua was really pretty amazing. But then to learn that hang on, Lua is a weakly typed programming language and is prone to making tons of mistakes, and there's absolutely no error debugging at all. I thought, oh god, this is it. We're like so close to being perfect, but we're just not quite there. And then, of course, my friend found out, oh wait, we can program in C sharp. Well, here we go, and that's it. We never turn back. So
This is my favorite part about the world editor. And when I say favorite, we're getting close to least favorite. I this map that I work on, it's so like built up, and
Mhm.
at one point 3 months ago I tried to convert the map to Lua, and it was like a whole process, like figuring out how to it's all in GUI and it's all in JAS,
Yeah, yeah,
and yeah, there was all these things that you had to do. You had to like go in and change all the single liners from like remove all the calls. And then
that's right.
when I finally converted the map to Lua, it just would desync all the time. And I
Yeah,
debugged it, Uncle from
I don't
Hive.
go on. Oh yeah, I might have heard of it. Yeah.
Uncle, he's just this dude who's just around. He's a huge homie. He tried to help me debug it, and I just couldn't fix it. So I was like so excited to use Lua for the map, and it just like Blizzard, thank you.
Yeah, it's the desync problem has obviously plagued everybody since the start of the whole Reforged thing. Uh, honestly, a lot of these desyncs, at least in most of the cases that I have seen, are usually the map maker's fault. I'll be honest.
Oh, for sure.
However, yeah, I mean, absolutely, a lot of them are. And the other cases are where they've used perhaps a BJ function, the
Yeah,
Blizzard
yeah.
inbuilt common functions, and a lot of those are asynchronous and cannot be used safely. And you've got to be really careful because some of them are, some of them aren't. You have to read through the documentation to actually find which ones are. So when it comes to kind of the basic level programming, nobody has any problem because they use GUI. But when you get to kind of mid-level programming and people are starting to learn to use JAS and bits of Lua, suddenly desyncs are everywhere. And I think that's what 99% of the complaints have been about. Like, oh, my map is desyncing. I don't know why. It's because you're using that kind of mid-level programming and you're not quite
Yeah.
sure of which ones are desyncing and which ones aren't. So yeah, it definitely happens.
This is what we figured out. So what was happening
Mm-hmm.
was, how you can open up the MPQ or
Yeah.
whatever, and you have like the compiled code from GUI.
Yes.
Somehow there were all these like relics of the past that were just like stuck in the compiled code that like weren't supposed to be there. So that was what I
Yep.
reasoned was happening, was like these BJ type calls were just like stuck
Yep.
in the compiled, and they like, so I don't know, I just gave up. I was like, fuck. I spent like
Yeah.
3 weeks on it. I googled every possible like desync like call. It was fun.
And I mean, people have even asked me in the past, like, "Hey, could you, look at this map and fix whatever?" And I'm just like, "Look, you are the master of your own code. You will know it 1,000 times better than me because I don't know your mind when you wrote it. So I imagine when you take over somebody else's map, as you have,
Yeah.
it must be a nightmare."
Oh, it is. And I know
Yeah,
the map really well now too.
Yeah, I would never recommend it to anybody. In fact, I would say always make your own, make what you love. You will know it better than anyone. You know, that's the best thing to do.
Yeah, I'm in a really tough spot for that because I'm actually starting to work on a new map, but
Okay.
there's like for these reasons, like it's gonna be in Lua. Fuck it, I might use your C sharp shit because I actually know C sharp because I did all
Mm.
this stuff in C sharp a couple of years ago. That
All
sounds
right.
dope.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
it will. It will. Believe me, it will blow your mind how much better it is. Imagine filtering groups of units using link statements. This is how good it gets. So you can just type like your unit group dot, and then just put a bunch of conditions in, and you
oh
filter the group
damn.
fast, and you can filter groups faster than the native GUI code can.
Well, I'm definitely gonna go watch that after this then.
It's amazing.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I'm like stuck between uh doing like starting a whole new map,
Hmm.
which I want to do. That's sounds fun. Like I get to do all,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's always fun to start a new project. And then having my existing pile of steaming garbage, which can be built upon
Yeah. Yeah.
more, but slowly, because I guess I could try to use Jas, but part of me has just been like, I just keep using GUI because I'm just like, I don't want to like keep fucking up. Like, I don't
Yeah.
know.
I think once you make the jump to whether it's C sharp, Lua, or in fact you can even get TypeScript these days
Yeah, I've heard about that one.
to compile into it as well. Once you make that jump, you'll wonder why on earth you didn't do it earlier. It really is that big. So
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I gotta double down. I guess
absolutely.
the trade off is having a map that's playable right now. That's the trade off. Is like this map,
Yeah.
the current one I can like make a patch playable. But the
Hmm.
new one is
Hmm.
like it'll take forever, you know.
Oh yeah, definitely. And it was the same when I was making the maps that I've made in the last year since Reforged launched, where I finished Desert Smite 1 was done like 5 or 6 years ago before Reforged, but Desert Smite 2 was like, okay, this is going to be the big thing. This is what I'm going to really focus on. As it turns out, it's actually not very popular, and to be fair, I'm okay with that. I don't mind if people don't play it because I'm just like, okay, well, I enjoyed it. It was a game that I liked to make, and it was a good challenge, and I learned a lot of things. And then, I'll make it, I'll be satisfied with it, and I'll go, okay, it's good. I'll let people play it, but I'm going to start working on the next thing. And that's when I made Fort Wars after that. Turns out Fort Wars took me about 1/3 the amount of time to make because I was much more, familiar with the C sharp and just the flow of programming, and I just got a lot better at it. So I made that in 1/3 of the time, and it turns out a lot more people like that game. Um, Partially, I would say, due to the fact that this one is more compatible with Classic as well. So I think
Yeah,
that helps. That helps too.
I swear, Wizard's the only one using Reforged graphics.
No, I do too.
I'm just
So
joking.
yeah, but I
You
know
and
what you mean.
him.
Yeah, we do. Yes. Unfortunately, yeah, I didn't realize just how. To be honest, it's not the graphics that are a problem for me. In fact, I would say the Reforged graphics. Yes, if you're a competitive melee player and you've been playing with the standard graphics for the best part of half your lifetime or whatever, you're not going to be able to adjust very easily to the new ones. That is a given. And I will agree that the performance is not as good either. That's obvious. Everybody can see that. Having said that, as a map maker, the reforged graphics are vastly better than the classic ones because of the enormous array of new models and things that we have that we didn't have access to before.
Yeah,
So,
I agree with you for sure, and especially because people are starting to make more Reforged models on Hive too,
that's right.
slowly but surely. But
Yeah.
as a melee player, I think one of the problems I had playing melee on Reforged graphics is there's less contrast I
That's
find,
true. Yeah.
too, which makes it like even harder to like.
Mm,
And I think
yeah.
there's inconsistencies with like hitboxes and stuff. That's what I
Uh,
heard.
I I'm not sure about that. By hitboxes, you mean like the size of the units, or specifically their like physical collision or range and things like that?
Um, no, not physical collision. Like just
Right.
when you like, yeah, I guess the size. Like
Like when,
there are
like for example,
inconsistencies with.
their click collision, for example.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that is definitely different.
Yeah,
And I can see how in a game that requires as much micromanagement as Warcraft 3 does at the high levels, that is going to be a big problem, especially when you've established a level of muscle memory over tens of years. To adjust to that is impossible, I would say. Yeah, so from that perspective, absolutely, I agree. Having said that, due to the fact that I live so far away from Europe, which let's be honest, everybody plays on Europe.
NetEase is actually super popular.
Oh yeah, well that's true. Yeah, although I have reserves about playing on a Chinese client, but I'll stick with the official ones for now. Um, but yeah, the vast majority of at least the custom map players and the streamers, etc., tend to focus on Europe because that's where most of it happens. Now, obviously, due to my location, I have a ping of well over 300 playing in Europe.
Right, yeah.
So I'm not going to be playing anything that requires extremely fast action. Saying that, I did used to play Dota 2 with a ping of 400 for about 2.5 years, and I got used to that. So, um, yeah, so as I said earlier, I make the games that I want to play, and the games that I want to play are ones that I can enjoy without having, without needing 90 ping or 100 ping, right? So I'm going to make things that are a little bit more slower paced, more tactical, more thought involved, and that's what I tend to go for.
Yeah, do you want to run through your like map, cuz you got a couple maps, like what map came first and like what was that map
Yeah,
like?
sure.
Cuz I read about it a bit, but if you want to.
Yeah, sure. So the first like actually serious map project I did back in probably like 2009, maybe around that time, was called Damage Team Survival, and pretty much run of the mill custom heroes. You play together, survive against waves of enemies, that kind of thing. The way I tried to like make it a bit more differentiated from all the other maps at the time was like all the heroes were completely custom. There were no standard heroes at all. Every ability was completely custom, and I had a big emphasis on stats affecting the power of your abilities. So, and that was something that I felt I did a good job with. I uploaded it to Hive Workshop, and it actually got um, not a huge amount of attention, but enough to make me happy. Like, oh wow, there's people who actually play this, so they like it, and they're making comments and things like that. Enough that I actually kind of updated it several times over the course of a couple of years, added a few new heroes, things like that. And I really, really enjoyed making that as well. A couple of years after that, I made a much smaller project called Magi Deathmatch Arena, which I can only describe as being the unholy child of Unreal Tournament and Warcraft 3. So think like a top-down shooting
Nice.
game, yeah, where you have to like run around and pick up weapons off the floor and then like shoot them at other players. Except rather than being weapons, they were spells. But yeah, it was just like a crazy kind of silly deathmatch game with loads of like projectile spells and stuff. But sadly, if you play that game on Reforged graphics, you can't use the teleporters, which is a bit sad because they're not clickable anymore in Reforged graphics. So that's sad.
See? Exactly.
Yep. Yeah, this is one of the problems. Yeah. So yeah, I made that. Major Deathmatch Arena was just kind of a fun little project. Got absolutely zero attention anywhere, but I played it with a couple of people. I played it with X Wizard, even not that long ago, probably. He's got a video on his channel, I think, which we quite enjoyed. So I enjoyed that at least. Yeah, then I made Desert Smite, and I think that's when everything changed, because Desert Smite was the first map that I made with my friend, who like I say, he's a very kind of in the shadows background kind of guy. He is a vastly better programmer than me. No question about that. But when we made this map, we were still using GUI at the time. But it got a lot of attention from a small group of people, and they had like a Steam group where they would play Warcraft 3 custom maps, and they basically just played my map again and again and again and again and again for probably over a year. And they kept giving constant feedback and giving their opinions, and yeah, and I really, really enjoyed that. And then I took a big break from Warcraft 3, probably for about 5-6 years, something like that. And the thing that brought me back was actually just randomly, I decided to Google Desert Smite. And the first thing that came up was a video on Vimp Gaming's channel where he was playing it. And I thought, oh, wow, this is only posted 1 month ago. Maybe I should say hi and, whatever.
Desert Smite 2.
Yes. And then that's when I decided, okay, Reforged is coming out. Time to make a new one. However, the second game is actually quite different to the first one. So the first one plays kind of a little bit more slowly, and it's very easy to kind of get into. The second game is a lot faster and more active. So it's a much more competitive game, the second one, which is probably why it wasn't as successful, but I don't know. Yeah, so, but there we go. And then, then I worked on Fort Wars, and now I'm doing this Assault the Throne co-op game, so that's right.
What's Fort Wars like? Is it good?
All right. I hope so. Yeah. Fort Wars got a lot more attention than I ever thought it would. Mainly, there's a couple of members of X-Wizards community that really like it, and they will play it a lot. And they are very, very, very good at it, actually better than me. And when you're better than the mapmaker, I think that says something, right? So, yeah, Fort Wars was actually based on a game that is available on Steam called Forts. Forts is kind of a RTS base building, but it's like physics-enabled RTS game. So you construct a base out of like bits of wood and metal and things like that, and then you build weapons and shoot at the enemy base. And so I tried to make something like that minus the physics. Yeah, it worked out anyway.
Yeah, it sounds cool. I'm definitely gonna play. I'm gonna play all your maps. Maybe Magi.
Yeah, the Magi Deathmatch Arena is a fun one. It actually has AI as well, so you can play it with computers if you want to try it out.
Ah, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't tell if it's tower defense. It looks like it's tower defense-esque.
Oh, Fort Wars.
Yeah.
Sort of. Like, it's basically a projectile shooting kind of chaotic party game. So yeah, you start with a building in the center, and then you can build structures around it. And any towers or offensive weapons you build, they will randomly shoot at the other players, but they shoot in a straight line, like projectiles. So if you build walls and structures, they'll actually block the missiles coming in. And you can build like towers that repair them, that kind of thing. It gets very, very chaotic, especially if you have a lot of players. If you have 6 people, it's just madness from start to finish. So
yeah, damn, that sounds cool.
Yeah, I mean, it was basically just me messing around with the libraries that my friend had created for custom projectiles. So that's what I was messing around with. Yeah.
And now we got Assault the Throne with custom,
yeah,
a little bit of fancy UI I've seen.
Yeah, it's got a lot more work to go, but that's the intent. Yeah. I think the biggest aspect of this map is that it has a codeless save and load system. So as you probably know, like a lot of RPG maps where you get to a certain stage, you type like -save,
Yeah,
and then you get this like enormous code that you have to write down somewhere or something like that, right?
yeah.
But thankfully, due to what is effectively an exploit in the Warcraft 3 engine, it's possible now to save that code locally and then automatically load it into a multiplayer game, which normally can't be done. Because as you know, if you try to load local information on one person's computer, you get 4 different answers for 4 different players,
Oh yeah.
which is a desync, right? So instead, there's a really bizarre code exploit where essentially you can write the information to an ability tooltip, and then you can
Oh yeah.
send that ability over the network, and it synchronizes with everyone, and then you can extract the code on each person's computer. It's kind of bizarre, but yeah.
I actually have that on my map. Somebody helped me set it up. I had no idea how it worked until now.
It's bizarre. It's so weird. But yeah, the file that it writes to your computer actually contains JAS code, and when the game attempts to preload it, it hits basically like a character that is not escaped. So then it starts to execute the code after it as though it was JAS code, and it goes from there basically. It's a hell of a weird exploit, but it effectively allows any kind of data to be loaded from the person's computer onto a multiplayer game, which is fantastic, really.
Gotta love Warcraft 3. They'll figure out anything, dude.
Yes, where there's a will, there's a way, especially with Hive Workshop. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I had a lot of hopes for. Have you seen the Hive World Editor? You must have.
Yes, I have. It's got a long way to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I have confidence that they will, go forward with it. At least from my perspective, the only thing I need the editor for now is making object editor data and doing the terrain, and that's it. I only use that for that now, due to all the code being outside in a third-party program now. So, but yeah, let's
You
go.
convinced me, dude. I was like, because right now I literally, like the past 2 weeks, if not a couple months, I've just been torn about like how to go about like because I wanted to transfer to Lua, but I already failed in converting to Lua. Do I make a new map? Whatever. But I like C# a lot. I know how to code in C#. You have a whole ass tutorial. Looking at it right now.
That's right. But yeah, the best thing about it is obviously it allows you to program in a proper programming program, unlike the giant, what is it, just a single text document that you have to dump all your Lua into to make it work.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's just ridiculous. So you can use like Visual Studio, which is obviously professional level programming environment. And obviously when it's in C#, you can have IntelliSense take care of everything. You never make any mistakes. It's like, oops, that argument's supposed to be a unit, not a integer or whatever. And it will tell you that immediately. Whereas in Warcraft 3, if you make some kind of error, it doesn't say anything until you hit save, and then it goes, oh, you made an error here. Now go back and do it again and wait another 6 minutes while we recompile your code again.
Yeah, I had a lot of hopes. Still have a lot of hopes for like when Blizzard started or when they added, I think like a year or two ago, natives for like UI and stuff.
Yeah.
Damn, it's fucking cool, man.
Yeah, it is. I would say the UI natives are a little bit clunky to get started with.
Oh, for sure. I'm like having a really hard time figuring it out. Like,
yeah, I mean, just doing what I did in that really tiny little preview video, just having a box come up with 4 buttons that you can click on vote on a game mode or something. It took a lot longer than I expected, especially because you have to consider that with the way that Warcraft 3's multiplayer works, everything is done over the network.
yeah.
So if you want to display an image and then you want to click a button and then display something else, well, you have to construct that window on everyone's computer, but you need to detect that when they click it, it only shows it to the correct player. And you need to be really careful, of course, because when you do that, desyncs. So it's a bit awkward, I have to say.
Yeah, for sure. I'll get there one day. Maybe with the C#, it'll. I have to say, there's like this strange dynamic with the Warcraft 3 modding community and Hive, where like on the one hand, people are amazing about like teaching how to do this and that.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, you have to know how to like the right Google keywords. Otherwise, you'll never
Yeah,
find it.
yeah. You have to know what to search for, definitely.
But
Yeah, I know what you mean.
it's way worse than Dota 2 because I was giving Dota 2 customs a try, and holy shit, they have nothing.
Yeah, well, that's. I suppose it comes with the territory. I think. I just think Warcraft 3 was probably certainly not the first, but definitely one of the biggest openly moddable games. To the point, and what I mean by that is more, it had a editor that was so easy to use. The only one I can think of that was probably before that is like Unreal Tournament, which was released in 1999, and that shipped with an editor that my 11-year-old self could work out with absolutely zero like online tutorials. It was so easy to work with. And now, obviously, that's a first-person shooter game. It runs on C, so not even C sharp, not even C++. It's C, which is a bit kind of
Managing
old now.
memory
By
is tough.
exactly, yeah. So most people could do like the simple stuff with that editor, which is just like make a level, and I think that's 99% of the things that people wanted to do anyway. But then, yeah, when Warcraft 3 came along, and it was like, oh, you can program, visually with a graphical user interface. Everyone's like, whoa, my God, and, get blown away. And I think that's part of the reason why there's so many resources out there, because everyone was doing it.
Yeah, I was so I majored in computer science, and I was like gonna go
Mm-hmm.
into the coding world. I've done a ton of coding, whatever. I know C,
Yeah.
and I was so shocked when I came into Warcraft 3 map making to see that like almost, I mean, just the maps that I play,
Yeah.
every map is like made by somebody who does not know how to code at all, and I was like,
Yeah.
how?
Yeah. Yeah. It's yeah.
It's good. I mean, it's cool.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, just even the things that I created in the earliest days. Yeah, we could make stuff that we thought, oh, that's so cool. The background code may have been absolutely horrendous. In fact, it probably was, and it was poorly optimized and everything. But from the player's perspective, they don't see that, and they just see, oh, this cool game that this dude just made in his bedroom or whatever. And that's the appeal of it, I think. Yeah,
Sure.
it's yeah, it's been a very big thing, definitely.
Did you ever give JAS a try, or did you go straight to C sharp?
Uh, I think insofar as like I got really, really heavy into GUI, to the point where I was actually stretching the boundaries of what GUI could do, to the point where I actually I have an abandoned project which I give out to anybody who wants to take a look at it, which is a massive like 24-player free-for-all battle royale game with PvE elements and RPG elements and everything thrown in. And the thing is, it had way too many GUI like magic going on in there. And it got to the point where the map just literally could not handle it. It would run out of memory too quickly. You couldn't finish a game, which sucked, obviously. So at that point, I realized, damn, this has completely crippled my creativity for this platform, because there's so much I wanted to do with this game, and I just cannot do it. And I thought, well, maybe I have to change something. So I started to look into JAS, but then I heard that Lua support would be added, And I thought, okay, well, what's the point? Might as well just jump straight to Lua.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
That's why I like
So,
refuse to do Jas, just because I'm like,
mm,
why? I mean, refuse is strong because it's the same, but I'm like, oh man,
yeah,
why would
yeah.
I learn this if I?
Absolutely, yeah. It's but yeah, it was I think that was probably quite a big disheartening moment when I realized that the engine, especially if you're writing GUI, you are physically limited by the memory of the map. You just cannot do it. Um, and yeah, that was a really kind of sad moment actually, because it was something I'd spent a lot of time on. Yeah, but
That's me right now. That's
yeah,
me right now.
yes, yeah, and I think I've talked with other map makers before who've said to me like, "Hey, my map gets really laggy in the late game, and I don't know what to do. I've already reduced the number of towers or units I can build." And the first thing I ask them is, "Are you programming in GUI?" And they go, "Yeah." I go, "Well, I'm sorry, you've hit the limit. You just can't go any further. You either have to massively rethink your scale, or you need to change programming language. There's not much you can do."
So what is it about? Like, is it just the whole like the way memory is managed?
Uh, Effectively,
Like, what's the difference
um,
between GUI and JAS? Because it just compiles into JAS anyway.
it does. It does. But the way it works is that effectively, for example, if you make, in GUI, if you make an if then else,
Yeah, yeah,
right? And you know how it like, you've got like a physical, like little area that you can slot in your conditions and your actions and everything, right?
yeah, yeah.
Right. So what that actually does behind the scenes is it creates one, two, three. I think
Oh,
it's three or maybe four functions, right?
oh,
So basically, your if statement is a function,
okay.
okay? And in that function, it runs smaller functions, which are your individual conditions, right? So you've got a function that contains, let's say, a function that says, is the unit alive? Next function, is the unit a hero? Next function, etc., right? So you've got a function that's running four different functions, right? The next thing is when you get to your then statements, every one of those is a function, right? So you've got a function that is then, and every action within that is another function, right? So let's say you have an if then else statement, which in your GUI code looks like, I don't know, 25 lines. That gets converted into probably 300, 500 plus functions. And every one of those functions has to be defined in the JAS code. Like function A takes this argument, outputs this value, and it does this. But then that runs another function, which has to be defined, etc., etc. Every one of these functions then has to be defined in reverse order because JAS cannot handle if a definition comes after the call. So it has to be defined in reverse order. So basically, it converts into this giant, awful mess of code that is gigantic. And every time JAS calls a function, it has to reserve a memory space to activate that function, to call that function. And sometimes, no matter what you do, those functions will leak. So basically, the more functions you have, the more rapidly it runs out of memory. And if you code in GUI, automatically you will have thousands upon thousands upon thousands of functions, and that will kill the game very fast.
I now know why my map D6 crashes. All that.
Yep.
Like, this is
It really
actually
is.
eye opening. Like, fucking hell.
Yeah, it's kind of incredible. The best way to do it, right? Just type, if you go into the trigger editor, create a simple trigger with that just says if this, then this, else this. Right? Just make one action and one condition in each one. Right click on the trigger and set convert to custom code. And you will see the code that it generates is horrendous. It's awful. It's so terrible. It makes a giant mess.
Oh, definitely. Because when I was inspecting my MPQ file to try to fix my shit, I learned
Mm-hmm.
that firsthand that my map was like a 20,000 line code. Like,
Oh yeah, sounds about right.
yeah, I'm just gonna show this off real quick since talking about it, and I can do it. What he's talking about with the if then else
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
is basically saying.
So yeah, if you right click on the trigger itself on the left, there should be an option that says convert to custom code or custom script, perhaps.
Enough.
Yeah, that's a good one. Oh, it may actually be on edit, perhaps at the top of the screen there. Yeah, convert to custom text. There you go. So click OK. Right. Do you see the word function written like 5 times?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. So you basically only had like one function in that trigger, and suddenly it's like 7.
Yeah, for sure.
The other thing as well is that every trigger you create, it has to do what's called an event listener, along with a binary operator in order to create the conditions for the trigger. So you'll see, yeah, in fact, your mouse is hovering over it there, trigger, register, etc., right? So what that is it's an event listener that listens to what is happening in the game. And it says, okay, when that happens, what should I do? And it goes, okay, I want you to run this trigger. But you have to assign the function, i.e. the actions, to the trigger as well. So you add the function, then you add the event listener, you create the trigger, and then the trigger listens to the events in the game. So that straight away means that for every trigger in your map, there's a function created to actually create the trigger in the first place.
Yeah,
So
like
yeah, when you're so when you're scrolling through like 700 or more triggers, yeah, that's going to be a lot of functions you've got right there.
Yeah, and so this is where it gets real brutal for this map. Like all the spawns are manual. So
Yeah, that's going to do it. Yeah.
Let's see if I can just off. So like every spawn is like this.
Oh dear.
Like, oh yeah, it's bad.
Oh no. Oh no.
I've just been convinced to just even if I just copy paste the terrain, I'll actually definitely be better off.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think probably one of the biggest causes of lag definitely is what we call the event listeners, i.e. for everything that happens in a game, you want to react to that thing by doing some actions. So for example, if you create a trigger and it says event, a unit dies. And then the next thing you want to do is say, oh, what type of unit is it? Who is it owned by? Who is the killer? All these kind of things, right? It doesn't matter how many conditions you put on that. Every single time a unit dies on the entire map at any time, that trigger will run. So if you have like 50 triggers that say when a unit dies, do this,
which I have in this map, by the way,
which most people do, it will run all 50 triggers every single time. And obviously, it doesn't run all of their actions because you're checking in the conditions, but it has to run those checks 50 plus times for every unit that dies. And that will murder the performance. So one of the kind of advanced steps towards GUI, at least if you want to stick with GUI, is to get what's called an event manager, where you only have one event listener that just says, when a unit dies, check against this giant dictionary of conditions, and then run the correct trigger, rather than running every single trigger at once and checking all of them, because that's horrendously inefficient. So,
wow, this is like the scoop, dude.
Yes, well, if you do make the jump to C#, the C# environment that my friend has created has an inbuilt event manager, so you don't have to worry about it.
So, okay, great segue.
Yep.
Let's say I wanted to, or somebody wanted to start map editing in C#.
Yep.
Beyond opening your video and which I'll link,
Mm-hmm,
doing the
mm-hmm.
setup, like what? Also beyond learning C sharp, like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
where would you advise to start?
Um, before even thinking about programming, the first thing is, are you making a game that you want to play? I mean, I said this earlier. Don't make a game because you think it'll be popular, because you will not make a game that will be popular unless you're incredibly lucky. And you're right, a lot of people have done that, but I can think of 1,000 times more games that have never become popular because they've been like a clone of another game. Because if you make a clone of another game, people will just say, "Oh, it's a clone. I'll just play the original." And I don't think you can ever go in with a mindset that will work like that. So always start with, what do you want to play? What is the game that you would like best? Make that. So that's the first starting point you should go with. So yes, on the programming side, obviously, I recommend always being on the latest version of Warcraft 3. I know a lot of people tend to use backdated versions for various like compatibility reasons. However, the number of features that have been added now, especially in the 1.29 and onwards, with things such as UI editing, etc., it's going to make it a lot easier for you if you just work on the latest version. So stick with that. Yeah, then the next thing, obviously, it helps if you want to be programming in C sharp, you need to understand how object-oriented programming works. I'll be honest, I didn't. I had no idea. But I mean, go online. You can find so many free tutorials out there. Like, what is object-oriented programming? Teach me how to do it. And there's so many free resources for that. After that, I would familiarize yourself with the quirks of Warcraft 3. It has a lot of very weird, janky mechanics, which, if you don't understand, they're going to confuse you, especially as a mapmaker. To give just one example, let's say you want to cast, you want a shockwave ability, but rather than just shockwave in one line, you want it to fire like, I don't know, a cone that spreads out multiple shockwaves. So you think, okay, well, how do I program that? And everywhere online will tell you, oh, you need a dummy unit. You need to spawn like an invisible unit that can cast the spell for you. And you go, oh, okay, right, great. So you're like, okay, I want this to be a boss ability. So you give your AI boss this ability, and he casts the spell, and only one shockwave fires forward, and then the other four like shoot at some guy over there. And you're like, wait, why does that happen? The trigger orders them to cast it in this like cone formation. But then you find out that thanks to a quirk in the Warcraft 3 engine, the AI can override orders from the trigger editor.
I didn't know that.
Yes, they can. And they are very, very annoying about it. To give you an example, if you give a unit the silence ability, so the AoE stop casting spells, right? If you give that to a dummy unit, then obviously, because it's a dummy, you want to make sure that it casts correctly. So usually you'll give it like an infinite range, zero cooldown, zero mana cost, etc. Right? The AI will flat out ignore your order. If you tell that dummy to cast silence, it will not cast it. It will always cast it where it wants to. So it'll go, hey, there's a spellcaster like right at the other side of the map. Yeah, I'm just going to cast silence over there instead. And it's absolutely infuriating because the AI can just ignore your orders. It doesn't care. So you have to learn all these like little exploits and cheats that you can use to kind of trick the AI to actually do what you want it to do. And it can be annoying. And that's just one example of an annoying quirk in Warcraft 3. There are many, many more. Once you understand the quirks, you'll realize what is possible and what is not possible in the Warcraft 3 editor. And once you realize that, you'll then find, okay, right. So I can't actually do this ability because of this problem or whatever. But then hopefully using C#, you can actually do almost anything, in fact. So, yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. And just to give an example of one of those kind of like quirk overrides, for example, if you give a dummy an ability based on cripple, they get very choosy about whether they cast it or not. So sometimes like you'll create the dummy, give it cripple, and then say, hey, cast it on this unit. And the AI goes, actually, there's something bigger over there that I'd rather cast cripple on. I'm going to cast it on that instead. And it gets really, really annoying. So what you have to do is instead, you use a positive buff and you make it controlled by the opposite player, except you put the values of the positive buffs to negative numbers. So it negatively affects the unit. And the AI goes, oh, I've got this positive buff. You want me to cast it on this unit? Sure, I'll do that. When in fact, it's actually a debuff. So, yeah. It's like a constant battle against the AI. It's so irritating.
I'm so glad I don't ever have to deal with AI.
Oh, yeah. It's very awkward. But there's many times where you want automated abilities and things like that, especially controlled by a boss or controlled by neutral units and things, and that's when you have to start and think about these annoying quirks. So
there's definitely a ton of annoying quirks everywhere.
Yeah.
I know firsthand. I mean, just some weird stuff with abilities too. Can't think of anything off the top of my head, but
yeah. I mean, another one that a lot of people don't even realize is a quirk, because the map makers sometimes they're aware of the quirk and they build it as a part of the game. You'll see a lot of people who play Hellholt, right? Vimp Gaming is a good example, right?
Yeah.
Everybody who plays Hellholt a lot knows that there's a unit, and I forget the name because I haven't played it a lot myself. There's a unit, I think at tier 1, that has fortified armor. And it says that the unit has a passive ability that says, this unit is attacked less often. It's like a low priority unit, right? That is actually not an ability. That does not exist in the game.
That's just
It's a quirk, yeah. Which is, if a unit has fortified armor, other units treat it as a building, regardless of whether it's a building or not. And the attack priority is always to ignore buildings and attack units first. So they'll always attack the other things first before they attack the fortified armor. And it's a quirk. But if you can build that as that that's happening, and you can build that into your game and just say, hey, this unit has low priority, then nobody will ever know. And that is the sign of a good map maker, when you realize these quirks happen and you can use them to your advantage or otherwise overcome them. So, yeah, definitely.
Damn, dude. I was not expecting to learn so much. I was just expecting to hear about your maps, and now I'm like, my mind is turning right now. I'm like, fuck, I gotta
yes.
go copy and paste to a new map.
Yeah, I think it's just my background as a teacher. I can't help it, really. But yeah, prior to being an English teacher, I actually used to be a physics teacher. So I studied physics at university. So it's these kind of logical processes and ways of thinking that it's my way of living.
Yeah. So I guess to close out, do you have any plans, hopes, dreams to go from like Warcraft 3 to an independent game anytime?
It's a difficult question.
That's why I asked it.
Yes, that's a good reason. Yeah. Yes, difficult question. The main reason I would say it's difficult is because, one, I really enjoy the array of assets that we have in Warcraft 3. The sound effects, the models, the special effects, the graphics in general. I am a programmer, but I am not an artist. I would never be able to create, animations, 3D models, etc., without it looking absolutely trash. I'll be honest. So yes, if I was to ever make a transition into a standalone game, then I would have to require the aid of a lot of other people, and I could never expect people to do things for free, which then means a lot of money investment, and anything I make can never be guaranteed to be successful. So it would be a dangerous investment. I am not a risk taker, I'll be honest. So for now, I'll stick with everything I can do by myself and for free. And if people like it, so be it. If nobody likes it, who cares? I enjoyed it.
That was great attitude, and I definitely resonate with what you're saying in terms of like
Yeah.
Warcraft 3 is an amazing platform for being able to make a game that people will play.
Yeah.
Like, you don't even need to advertise it as much as you would a real game.
No, exactly.
I mean, like a real game, literally nobody could play it. Like, it could just be on Steam, but you know, there's the custom game list, there's Hive Workshop, there's all these really Discords. You can go to Vimp, be like, hey Vimp, will you play my map, please? But,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's what has, like, I'll answer the question too. Like, I would love to do that, but I know that for the same reasons that you said, like, might as well just make, you know, a game that can be played now. Then, you know, invest all this time, whatever, and then the game has to have a release, and then people may not even play it. Like, you can release a prototype and throw it up on custom games and like get feedback like instantly. Like,
and yeah, as I was saying at the very beginning, you know, the feedback problem, right? If people are just playing your game for free, you know, you can say, yeah, well, that's a great idea, but I kind of know my map better than you do, so I know that that's not going to work. It's a very different story when you have paying customers who are saying, hey, we don't like this, we paid. Suddenly the onus or the impact of their feedback suddenly becomes a lot more powerful, I think.
that is also true.
Definitely, yeah.
All right, word. Well, unless you have anything else, so you want to wrap up?
I think the only thing I would say is just, yeah, for anybody who watches the show and is also thinking about making their own maps, yeah, it's yeah, hello there. Basically, make what you want to make. Make the game that you enjoy, and don't make what somebody else wants you to make, and don't make what you think will be popular, because you will not enjoy it, and you'll be holden to other people's expectations, and you don't want to do that. You want to fulfill your own expectations.
Fucking great advice.
Go for it.
All right, we're gonna raid Wizard. Thanks for watching. If you're on YouTube, drop a
Thank you.
subscribe, comment. Check out LordDamage's map if you want. We got Bitly's. It's also Wizard and Vimp have videos of it. So if you just search it,
we're down here.
Yeah, you're down there. Yes, perfect. Also, you stream. You mentioned you stream sometimes. I looked at your stream. You stream some weird game. No offense to the game.
Yeah.
Yeah. Check that out too.
That's right.
Is it weird?
It's a fantastically fun game. It's very, very funny. Especially it has inbuilt Twitch integration, so it's just a really chaotic and hilarious game. So I really recommend it. But yeah,
it's actually relatively popular.
Oh yeah, it's a quite new game. It's called Noita. So yeah, check it out. It's good.
I'll stop by for the next one.
Yeah. Usually I stream on Wednesday around 5 to 6 p.m. Japan time. So
like 5 a.m.
Yeah, whatever that is
in America.
Yeah, it's probably the opposite time, I guess. There you go.
All right, word. Cheers.
Thank you very much.